Most of us don't interact with icebergs often, but we know one of the big reasons why ships avoid them. Icebergs may look like an unassuming sliver of ice, but often, the water is hiding a much larger mass below the surface. When we want to communicate across cultures, we start by learning elements of the culture that are easily visible. Things like food, dress, and important holiday decorations and celebrations. But under the surface are a lot more cultural elements that may only emerge after we've interacted with that culture for a while. We learn about historical events that have shaped how people view the world. We see assumptions about behavior and even spiritual beliefs come out over time. If we met someone from another country for the first time, we're much more likely to ask, what kinds of foods are most popular where you grew up? Instead of, how has your family structure been influenced by the history and educational system of your country? Yeah, exactly. That second one requires a lot more time to answer, and we're all hungry. Today, we're going to discuss how our cultural assumptions and expectations impact intercultural communication and, honestly, even communication inside the same culture. I'm Cassandra Ryder, and this is Study Hall, Intro to Human Communication. Let's back up for a sec. We've heard the word culture before, but for this course, let's think of culture as a learned pattern of behaviors shared by a certain group. Cultures can extend throughout a whole country, or they can exist in smaller regions. They don't even have to be associated with a place. Generations like millennials and Gen Z are cultural groups too. If we want to communicate effectively with anyone, it helps to know our assumptions and our audience's assumptions before we start sharing ideas. Intercultural communication is a specific field of study that evaluates how cultural behaviors and assumptions influence how we communicate, and what knowledge would help communicators to resolve any misunderstandings between cultures. No one is perfect at communicating across cultures, or even communicating in general. So researchers have thought through how we can improve our intercultural communication competence over time. Scholar E.T. Hall and other linguists, psychologists, and anthropologists were tasked with helping military business personnel in foreign countries by teaching them how to speak and act like the locals. The idea was that if they blended in, they'd be able to get along and be accepted. Unfortunately, that method often relies on observations that are at the tip of that cultural iceberg. And most people notice a foreign military leader as a bit out of place, even if they choose the right meal at a restaurant or wear clothes that are common for the area. Researchers began to look for cultural elements we might not learn until we really spend time in that culture. They wanted to know what cultural assumptions are at play in all cultures. For instance, Garrett Hofstede's 6 dimensions model of national culture evaluates a given national culture on dimensions that categorize differences in values and attitudes. These dimensions help us understand the perspective that people in that culture often bring to their communication. For example, one dimension measures uncertainty avoidance, or how much a culture tolerates ambiguity versus straightforward communication. Another dimension measures indulgence versus restraint, or how people seek pleasure versus focusing on responsibilities. Knowing whether most people in a culture will expect us to be humble in our lifestyle or to be frank in our speech can be very helpful to communicating in ways that people will recognize as appropriate. Another influential dimension in the model weighs the ideas of an individualist culture or a collectivist culture. Individualism and collectivism are cultural orientations pertaining to the degree of interdependence a society maintains among its members. Individualist cultures tend to see more communication about and identify as I, while collectivist cultures see themselves primarily through the lens of we. There are all kinds of results from these background assumptions, including how individualistic cultures tend to uplift the need to gain and maintain independence and to primarily look out for their immediate family. They focus on looking out for themselves and advocating for their needs. Collectivist cultures may place more value on being a caring and loyal member of the groups in which they belong and their family units. They value and focus on their roles in their family and groups, knowing that the group will be helpful and loyal in return. Let's look at how a particular communication situation could play out when a person from an individualist culture and a person from a collectivist culture need to communicate with each other. Elle and TJ are working on a group project for their marketing class where they are designing a commercial for a local credit union. While they agree on some things, they disagree on how to describe the values of credit unions. Elle is from a family and a town where everyone knows everyone. She feels like she was raised by a variety of different people, not just her parents. TJ spent most of his time with just his immediate family, where the expectation was that turning 18 made TJ fully independent. Elle wants to express that a credit union is a community, a place where you and your family can find resources to support each other. TJ thinks it'd be better to emphasize what individual members can do with the credit union services, like buying a house, paying off debt, or starting a business. At first, Elle feels like TJ's concept isn't focused enough on connection. TJ thinks that community isn't the point of a financial company. They're at odds, and they're not sure how to proceed. When they explain their conundrum to their professor, she asks Elle why she finds community support so important. She does the same with TJ. Where does the value of starting a business come from? They end up sharing just enough that they both understand why the other has their own perspective. The final commercial, they realize, doesn't have to pick just one focus. They design materials that focus on how the credit union gives you a place to grow, a metaphor that works for growing in a community setting or as an individual. Just a little intercultural understanding went a long way. Collectivism and individualism play out in a variety of ways that may not be as straightforward as Elle and TJ. Think about how we protect the feelings of others and our own feelings in conversation. We might grow up in a family that mercilessly teased each other and think that teasing is a way to connect with a coworker. If that coworker isn't used to teasing being a positive thing, they could take it very differently than our intention. Our attempt to connect might come across as an attempt to hurt or embarrass them. Researcher Stella Ting-Toomey discusses how cultures often have different levels of concern for each other's feelings in a theory known as face negotiation theory. Face is defined as self-image when communicating with others. This is where the phrase saving face comes from. Think about a teacher telling a student that their answer to a question during class was incorrect. There are a wide range of ways to do this, from a harsh, wrong, pay better attention next time, to something softer like, I see why you thought that, but the answer actually is. In one case, the teacher may not respect the face of the child in question, or may see that child as needing to learn a lesson about distraction in class. In the other, the teacher is prioritizing the student's courage to speak up again in the future, rewarding their effort by showing they were on the right track. While every culture is different, individualist cultures often involve lots of personal self-advocacy. Think of sayings like, look out for number one, or be your own advocate, as reflecting this idea. Collectivist cultures may use indirect communication within their close-knit groups out of a strong need to prevent dismay and embarrassment, even if everyone involved knows that a mistake was made. There may even be an overall standard of letting things go the way they've always been, rather than standing out through self-advocacy. There's a Japanese phrase that translates loosely to, the nail that stands up gets hammered down. Standing out from the crowd isn't always a value, particularly if there's safety and consistency in sticking to the group norms. We can keep an eye out for this kind of communication in school, work, and our personal lives. Maybe people around you are always bragging about themselves or bugging you for favors. Or maybe your friends spend a lot of time discussing group dynamics and thinking through what their family or friends need. Noting these tendencies can give you an idea of which kind of communication may be more effective if you need to convey a message yourself. We're painting cultural groups with a fairly broad brush here, and we don't want to assume the most extreme version of any cultural trait just because we meet someone from that place. At the same time, awareness of cultural values is a great place to start as we keep learning to communicate effectively across cultures. In a given moment, we'll need to stay curious, listen carefully, and be open to being surprised. There are individualists in collectivist cultures and vice versa. Learning some cultural etiquette is a great step, but it's wise to stay humble about our understanding of other cultures. It's good to be able to laugh at ourselves if we mispronounce a word or accidentally wear a local garment backwards. Instead of assuming we know all there is to know, we seek more and more subtle understanding about motivations and interactions, and we use that information to be truly flexible and willing to learn from the perspective of others. Making the effort to keep learning makes our own minds just that much more rich and complex. Thanks for watching Study Hall, Intro to Human Communication, which is part of the Study Hall project, a partnership between ASU and Crash Course. If you liked this video and want to keep learning with us, be sure to subscribe. You can learn more about Study Hall and the videos produced by Crash Course and ASU in the links in the description. See you next time!